it's my pleasure to introduce, first of all, playing the priceless Ambrose, Mr. Bill Nye. Starring as Katrin, Gemma Arterton, the only actress I can think of who has played a Centrinian schoolgirl and the Duchess of Malfi. That's what you call range. The fabulous director, Lana Scherfig. A handsomely mustachioed Sam Claflin. As the no-nonsense Phyllis, Rachel Sterling. Producer Amanda Posey, and producer Stephen Woolley. Now, even though you're sitting as far away from me as possible, Amanda and Steve, I'd like to start with you. Amanda, you and Finola Dwyer are, among other things, the first women production team to have had the distinction of 2 Academy Award nominations for Best Picture with an Education, and last year's Brooklyn. Steve, you and Elizabeth Carlson have made some crackers as well, including last year's Carol. I wondered what brought you 2 together on this one.
Well, I was just going to say that we both, unbeknownst to each other, fell in love with this book at their finest hour and a half. And Stephen, usually very good at detecting things, found out that I was the other person competing for the book. And we know each other of old. And he called me up and said, we've got to do this together.
Yeah, Amanda and I worked together many years ago on films. Amanda actually worked with me on Interview with the Vampire and on the post-production of The Crying Game, so we've known each other for a very, very long time. And when I found out with Amanda I rang her up and just said, this is completely crazy. In fact, we made Fever Pitch together all those years ago. So I said, why don't we just do it together? Which was great, and it was a real joy, and it was really, we were both fell in love with Lissa's book, to be honest, although it wasn't, in fact, a bestseller.
No, and it wasn't an obvious adaptation to film, but I think we both felt very passionate about bringing this story about filmmaking and storytelling from the war to the public.
Hey, thank you. Lorna, you've made wonderful films in your native Denmark, like Italian for Beginners, but you seem to really be on a roll of showing a remarkable affinity with British actors and tackling the tone and the atmosphere of very particularly British stories. Why is that, do you think? What's the appeal to you?
It is just that the British actors, the British stories, the British architecture, London, that I love more than ever because of this film and because I get to know your film history better with this film. But primarily, of course, it's the scripts, because when you first read it, it's scripts that I feel related to, that I can tonally think I can work with, where I feel close enough to the writer to feel I'll be loyal to the material and still feel that I have something to bring to the table. And for some reason, those scripts are from here.
Gemma, you're already showing remarkable range in your career, but this is another string to your bow. I wondered what appealed to you most, the idea of this woman finding herself almost accidentally, or just the love letter to filmmaking when making movies mattered terribly?
Both. I was very impressed to see a story that focused on, the center point is a woman who's sort of not necessarily a showy character or even feisty or strong and all of that stuff, and she's just her. It's quite sort of gentle, and yes, and then just making a film about filmmaking is we all know that world, and it's our expertise, or some of our expertise is. So and also I've been wanting to work with Lona for so long, and then this came along, so very lucky.
A no-brainer.
Yeah.
Sam, I'm not sure if it's the mustache, but it seems to me that this is the most mature role you've done, the most grown-up character. And he could be so, he's, it's interesting that because he's cynical and he's got his bitter, twisted side, but he's also, you managed to make him very endearing. I was wondering how, this was a new experience for you, surely, how you psyched yourself into being Mr. 1940.
I think I just grew a moustache. I think that's true. That was all me. I was very happy about that. No, I think for me, it was a departure from anything I've done before. Like, it was very different. It was a very, very mature role, as you say. And I think I was fortunate enough, this being my second time working with Lona, I knew the way that she liked to prepare and sort of rehearse. And I always enjoy exploring a character in a world, you know, with a company of people. And I think I wasn't alone in sort of navigating that. Like with Gemma, we were fortunate enough to have a very early script read, and I think we sat down with Amanda and Stephen as well. And I think it was such a collaborative thing, and I don't think I ever really thought too hard and too deeply about it. I think I just sort of, I remember Lona approaching me just after shooting Riot Club, sort of said that there's this other project I'm thinking of doing, and you're perfect for this part. And I think when I read the script, I was like, I don't see why I'm perfect for this part. But I think, strangely, I think I did naturally just fall into it a little bit. And I think having Gemma as a sparring partner, that chemistry was sort of there without having to try. And, you know, it sort of was quite easy. I hate saying that it was easy. I'm such a good actor. It was so easy. No, but it was free. I felt free. Yeah.
Thank you. Rachel, I'm struggling to see you down there. Phil is such a rockin' chick for 1940. You have one of in a film full of great lines, you have one of my favorites, which is when you say, they're afraid that they won't be able to put us back in the box when this is over, and it makes them belligerent.
My favourite line is, he's an actor. Unless you've reviewed him, had intercourse with him, or done both simultaneously, he won't remember you.
Was it the script that appealed to you the most, or was it the whole atmosphere and tone?
It was all of those things. I'd seen Lona's films before, and the script entirely. Phyllis is a true original. And we've managed, it's not a navel-gazingly thing, but what I do love a film about filmmaking. I like seeing the doing of stuff, the texture of it, which Lona captures so beautifully, and her DOP. The Red Shoes is my favourite film of all time. I like seeing how things are done, and this explores that so extraordinarily. And then on top of it, you have the realism of the war and the fantasy of filmmaking. So to me, it has all the elements that I want to sit in a darkened room and see come together.
Lovely, thank you. Bill, I'm sure I'm not the only one wondering if when you were a mere stripling at the RSC, you may have known some seasoned hams of yesteryear who might have inspired Ambrose a tiny touch.
How dare you? I've never worked at the RSC, just for the record. You have,
I saw you.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You just wished you'd seen me at the RSC. I have never worked for the Royal Shakespeare Company. But my classical work, there's a very distinct lack of classical work on my CV, which is largely because I refuse to operate in those kind of trousers. Which is not even a joke. I just, if you want the best out of me, I have to be in a decent lounge suit, as we used to call it. So this part, I got to wear some very big trousers in this part. What was the question?
If it was all you, or if you'd been inspired by it.
Oh, I see. I don't know about. It's funny because I haven't met that word ham, which is a sort of period word, and I understand what you mean, but I haven't actually met that many. It's a generational thing. I don't think they survived into the modern era. I mean, there are versions of it, I suppose. I don't generally respond to. Actors are brought on as characters in movies and plays, usually for unattractive reasons. They're not brought on to demonstrate how wonderful human beings can be. It's like journalists are often, if journalists they're occasionally heroic. You very rarely get a heroic actor. They're generally brought on to demonstrate what a mess we can be. But this script was very, very cool and it's extremely satisfying in every area, and I very, very much wanted to work with Lona, as did everybody else. I admire her tremendously, and I was so thrilled when this script came through the door with her name attached to it. I love the book too, and it is a great, you know, and it's conspicuously a great role because I get to, you know, fanny around in various different forms. But you know, they were looking for someone to play a chronically self-absorbed actor in his declining years, and they thought of me, which is something that's easier to process on some mornings rather than others.
But you do it so beautifully. Thank you. Okay, ladies
I'd like
and
to thank my colleagues for having listened to that joke about 18 times.
Okay, it's over to you, ladies and gentlemen. If I could see some hands. Okay, I'll pick 3 to begin with so we can get microphones to you. Lady here, please. Lady here. And the gentleman who isn't just waving at me. The blonde. You weren't just waving at me, were you? Yes. Okay. Go first, please.
Okay, do I need...
Yes, give it the mic. Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, good morning. Can you hear me? I can't tell. This is a question for Gemma. I've got to look at my notes here because the character that you play of Catherine, when she's brought in to do the writing on these propaganda films, she's brought in to write the nausea and the slop for women. Was that a phrase that you have been familiar with before? And did it make you feel a little bit nauseous that women were expected to write this stuff back in the day?
Yeah, it was I'm not wrong in thinking it was a term used.
Yeah, no, it wasn't
Slop.
a populist term. It was used at Ealing Films. They had one female writer only at Ealing who was employed just to write the female dialogue, and so they called it the nausea because they would say give it to and she was Welsh, in fact. Her name was Diana Morgan.
Yeah.
And so they would give her the nausea, but it wasn't an industry term as such, but at Ealing it was. So at Ealing Films, who made all those wonderful movies during the war and after the war, it was a term that was used. So I think Lissa, who wrote the book, picked up on the nausea and turned it into slop, which was another term that was used in America, in fact, for female writing. You know, that's the slop. So it was actually in terms of film screenplay, there were a lot of women employed during the war who were never credited, given 50 quid just to write the female parts. In fact, there was a woman employed on The Third Man. Nobody knows quite what she wrote on the film, but she could have written that famous Orson Welles speech for all we know. So women were hired all the time to write nausea or slop.
Yeah, but for you, Gemma, in the 21st century, do you find that quite sexist? or was it because it was part of that era?
Yeah, well, of course, it's obviously sexist. I think, funnily enough, for Catherine, I don't think she's aware of it. I think at that time, people just kind of accepted that we hadn't had that second wave, we hadn't had the feminist movement yet, and so it was sort of we were in the 1940s. You just kind of got on with it. I would imagine, and what I like about Catherine is that she is a feminist, and she doesn't know it yet. She just sort of within that circumstance sort of ends up being pushed into certain situations where she ends up putting her point down. But and I like that about this film is that it has a message, but it's very, very underneath, and it doesn't sort of shout about it. It's just there. I think that's stronger than kind of making a big deal out of it.
Yeah, it's the casual sexism that I think was quite attractive in a sense to me, because I think it is of an no. Sorry, let me rephrase that. No, but it is of a time, and I think it sort of proves how far we've come. I mean, there's obviously still a lot further to go, but there's a line I remember. I think Phil says, "Obviously, you won't get paid as much as the boys," and it's just something, that was standard of that time. But I think we've got a lot further to come. But I sort of loved the sort of subtle humour of the time, which we laugh at now, but at the time was a very serious thing. But something that wasn't sort of necessarily talked about as much as it should have been.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am?
Good morning. A question for Sam and for Gemma. Having now played screenwriters, I just wondered whether you've got a sort of greater respect for the craft of screenwriting now.
Yeah. It's hard. It's constructing a film and I mean, at the moment, I'm making my own film at the moment, but I haven't written the dialogue. That bit, I just can't even think to go there. But it's really, really intricate, and I mean, especially under this guise of, you know, propaganda filmmaking, so it had to be a certain way. And even though, you know, making films now, they can't necessarily make what you want to make. You have to kind of make them around certain regulations and things like that. But yeah, it's an incredible, incredibly detailed process that I often just before didn't realise how difficult it was. But also so thrilling. I mean, the scene, I think one of my favourite scenes is when we're kind of brainstorming together, and it's so thrilling, and I can imagine it's like that, isn't it, Lona? It's just like that. You just brainstorm and suddenly there's all these amazing ideas and then a story comes.
Sometimes it is the best job you can have, and what I'm hoping is that a lot of writers will want to become screenwriters after having seen those films, because as actors know, they are the most important. The script is the most important part of a film, with all respect. But you already knew that. You're from here.
Yeah.
And
It's only because I read the script. But I think for me, I've tried my hand at writing a script, and I found it incredibly difficult to make the characters sound different to myself. I think I ended up just using my voice, but as I was sort of reading the lines out loud, I was like, they all sound exactly the same, even the female and the men, which is great again. But like, it's, you know, it's sort of all. And then after writing a couple of what I thought were incredibly great scenes, I then realised I didn't know what was going to happen after that or what happened before that. Or I think structurally, like to have the gift of being able to structure something. Like a film, like a story, like a novel, like a series or whatever. I think that's incredibly difficult, and I think it's a gift for the people that do and are fortunate enough to actually make sense of stories that need to be told. But yeah.
Thank you. Up there, you got your mic?
I do indeed. Congratulations everyone on the film, first of all. This is a question to everyone, but I guess perhaps starting with Gemma. I guess firstly, how specifically it feels to bring this film here to the London Film Festival, and in a wider sense, what for you is the true power of cinema, the magic of cinema, which I think this film in part is a celebration of?
Okay, I will answer it a bit, and then I'll pass it on like I always do. No, I'm really proud of this film, and I feel like it's so wonderful to show it here. I mean, tonight we've got Sadiq Khan sort of hosting it, and I just feel, you know, it's a real love letter to London and how wonderful it is, and how wonderfully diverse the culture is, and what we can do here, and the spirit of London. So yeah, to show it here is really exciting, and I think it's very hopeful and very a hopeful film, and I think which is obviously what we need right now. And also, yeah, it's transportive. That's a word, isn't it? I have to check with Rachel, because Rachel knows words, and she's like a dictionary. But I think that's for me. I mean, my taste in cinema is quite bizarre, and sometimes I like to be completely disturbed by films. But this is not disturbing. It makes you feel happy, and it reminds you that you might even feel emotion sometimes. So yeah, I'm very proud of it. Now someone else needs to talk, please.
I think for us, we just loved making a film about a time when making films was so important. You know, producers always act like it's a matter of life and death. We got to get our money, we got to get our star, we got to get our look. Oh my God, we've fallen through. Oh, what are we going to do? But actually, when they made films in the 40s, it was a matter of life and death. They had no idea if they were going to have a film set the next day, whether they were going to have any actors, whether the Germans had invaded. And these films were little love letters to America. Please come and help. Please come and help. And also at the same time trying to keep the people living through the Blitz in London, in Coventry, in Bristol, across Britain, you know, keep them happy, keep a smile on their face. How can we do this? How can we make films? So for us as producers, we think we have challenges. But when you look back at the writers and producers and directors and actors in those days, my God, they had challenges. It was an incredible time. And I'm just so proud to be associated with a film, having made films like Absolute Beginners and Mona Lisa and The Crying Game and Scandal and all those movies I made, which were about London, which were all sort of love letters to London. It's so great to make a film that's really about filmmakers and filmmaking at a time when it was a matter of life and death. And that's an important factor for us, for both Amanda and I, when we were making this film, is that, you know, they look a bit corny, those films now, but actually they were so important. 30 million people a week used to go to the cinema. That, you know, that's never going to happen again. I mean, this was the golden age of filmmaking and film going, and people needed those movies.
Can we get the mic to the lady in the front row? And let me line up a couple of others. Is there mic to this gentleman second, and one more, and that lady. Okay. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, it's very much a film about filmmaking, and in Catherine's case, starting out in an exciting industry for the first time. What advice, if you were to go back, would you give to anybody starting out in the film industry today?
I'd say work with really good people that you admire. Try and get their attention, and try and get a lowly level job in whatever way you can in the companies and with people whose work you admire. That's my advice.
Okay, yes, sir.
Hello, here. A question for Gemma and Lona. I just wanted to go back to what Sam said. He quoted that line from early on in the film, that, you know, you won't get paid as much as the chaps. How much is that kind of attitude still an issue in 2016?
Lona? You'll know what I think about that.
I was thinking about a different line when Buckley says, girls don't want to be the hero, they want to have him, they want to be had by him. And Catherine hardly reacts to it. I don't think it really sinks in the scene. Yeah, it was just another example in the film of her tasting blood, finding out how much fun it can be to go to work little by little, because she didn't expect that. And his increasing respect for her, Buckley's finding his emotional identity, and Catherine's finding her professional identity. And I think that happens all the time in our world today. So, and if you're asking about relevance or professional relevance or emotional relevance for men and women today, I never felt that this film was primarily a feminist film. I always thought the film history, the love story, Ambrose's character was what attracted me more. And that the whole story about a woman finding out what she can do and gaining respect for it is definitely the main plot in the story. But the whole package, all the details, London, the film industry, the necessity is what gives the film its depth and its complexity. It's much more than a story about a girl who finds out how much fun you can have at work.
Go ahead.
Hello, it's a question for Gemma and Sam. There are quite a few twists in the story, in the plot. Did you play any active part in the screenwriting at all?
Sorry, I don't understand
there are lots
twists.
of twists.
Yes.
I think maybe a bit more than usual.
No, we didn't.
I mean, the source material was Lissa's book, and therefore I think the structure of the film was already there for us. I mean, it felt so. I mean, Gabby Chiappi adapted the novel to film, and her script was so rhythmic and so kind of musical in its sense that it felt there wasn't much that we could have added to make it any better. I remember the first time I sort of sat and read it, and I spoke to my agent, was like, do you know what, I really want to do this. It feels very musical and very physical, in the writing. It was always on the move. Everyone was sort of always walking. There was, as I say, there was a rhythm to it, and I think that's sort of very rare. And I don't think I could have added anything to that would have been of worth anyway.
I think that I was thinking about that earlier, that the four of you are all so musical, not just smart at analyzing, but you are musical and you are all good dancers and you all have funny bone. And I think making this very intricate, complex script light and effortless is key to make it land on both legs. And I think the actors have a lot, or that they can do this. No one else can make it organic, light, throwaway, where it actually is not, or not all of it is, because there's so many stories you want to tell with this film, and there is so much material, and there's so much love for filmmaking and all these details, but still to make it feel natural is very much because of the actors.
I think we just have time for one more question, if we can. Yep.
Hello, I'm Karin Svensson, Swedish Radio, and we've been touching upon this before, but there is this point that the film makes that's really poignant and modern about the importance of female screenwriters and in making better roles for women and also empowering the female audience. And I'm wondering how eager you were to make that point, how important it was to you, and I'm wondering, I want to ask Gemma about how you felt about that part of the story.
Yeah, I'm come from such a privileged background that I feel that when you talk about feminist issues, it makes much more sense for me to talk about the third world, or women who are much more needy than I am. I get so many good jobs. I get to work with so many fantastic people, and every workday of my life I work with men who are not oppressive at all. So I'm just not good at answering these questions. I mean, look at us. There's no reason to complain. Not that I teach writers and directors, and I can, behind closed doors, in small groups or individually, tell them what they should do to address the problem you're talking about. But I think it would be ungrateful I mean, we've just made this film about a young girl who has so many skills, and Rachel's part, who is a walking proof that women can be really strong and strategic, and men in this film who change, who both love women. Yeah. Maybe Amanda is better at answering you.
Well, no, all I was going to say was that pressure in the film, in the storytelling, about trying to keep to the truth of the story and find a way to tell that truth in an accessible, enjoyable, delightful way that also satisfies the Ministry of Information in this particular guise, or the American distributors in this film as well. Those are the things that I think people respond to. It happens in this story that her truth is that it's the two sisters, and the two sisters are the heroes of the piece. And that has a lovely, in a sense, feminist sort of influence on the film. But in fact, it's about finding the truth in your story and holding true to the centre of your story and taking that through to the end of the film.
I think, weirdly, we make a film within a film, and the film within the film is a flag-waving one with a message. But the larger enterprise isn't that. You know, it's a thing of joy, absolute joy, and of celebration, and a celebration of women rather than a proclamation about them, you know. I think it's it's a sort of message one can impose upon the film, but one that we're not standing up and screaming about.
Thank you all so much for being so lovely and giving us your insights. I'm afraid we have to let the delightful team, their finest, off to the next, but thank you for being with us. And if you'd just sit in your seats for one moment so we can help them slip out. Thank you all very much.